My name is Rebecca Chin. I'm 34 years old, and exactly 47 minutes after my father told me I wasn't needed at our family's Thanksgiving dinner, I sat in my car and systematically canceled every single automatic payment I had been making for the past 9 years. The electricity bill that kept their lights on, the internet that my teenage niece used for her online classes, the car insurance for the vehicle my brother drove to work every single day, the mortgage payment that prevented foreclosure on the house where 3 generations of my family currently lived. Gone. All of it. At precisely 11:23 p.m. that Thursday night, while my extended family was probably settling into their post-dinner stupor in the living room I had just been ejected from, my phone started vibrating so violently it nearly fell off my nightstand. By the time the sun rose on Black Friday, there were 127 missed calls cluttering my lock screen. My mother had left 14 voicemails, each one progressively more frantic than the last. My brother Jason sent 43 text messages that devolved from confused questions to desperate pleas to outright threats. But it was my father's final message, sent at 4:17 a.m., that truly captured the spectacular irony of the situation. What did you do? The bank is calling about the mortgage. Your mother is hysterical. How could you be so selfish? Family doesn't abandon family like this. I read that message 3 times, letting each word sink in like stones dropping into still water, creating ripples of bitter amusement. Family doesn't abandon family. The phrase was almost poetic, coming from the man who had looked me directly in the eyes just hours earlier and said, with the casual cruelty of someone commenting on the weather, "We don't need you here anymore, Rebecca. You're making everyone uncomfortable with your attitude. Maybe it's better if you just go." Before I explain exactly how we arrived at this particular catastrophe, let me know where you're viewing from in the comments section below. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever been the family member who carried everyone else's weight until your back finally broke. Trust me when I say this story gets considerably worse before it gets even remotely better. To really understand why my father's dismissal felt like a knife sliding between my ribs, you'd have to go back 9 years to a humid August afternoon when everything in my world shifted on its axis. I was 25 years old, fresh out of graduate school with a newly minted MBA and a job offer from a prestigious consulting firm in Manhattan. The salary was $127,000 annually, more money than anyone in my immediate family had ever made. I remember my mother crying with pride when I told her, my father actually hugging me for the first time in years, and my younger brother Jason slapping me on the back with genuine excitement. That same week, my grandmother suffered her first stroke. She survived, but the medical bills started arriving like an invading army, relentless and overwhelming. My father, who managed a small hardware store that had been struggling for years, sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, his face gray with stress. "I don't know how we're going to manage this," he said quietly, not to anyone in particular, just speaking the terrified thought aloud into the universe. My mother, who worked part-time as a receptionist at a dental office, had tears streaming down her face as she looked at the numbers. "We might lose the house," she whispered. "Your grandmother needs round-the-clock care, and Medicare won't cover even half of what she requires." I made a decision in that moment that would define the next 9 years of my life. "I'll help," I said, the words coming out before I'd fully thought through the implications. "I'll postpone the New York job. I can find something local and help with the bills until we get everything sorted out." The relief on their faces was immediate and profound. My father actually cried. My mother hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. They told me I was saving the family, that I was their blessing, their miracle. What they never said, what I didn't understand then, but comprehend with crystal clarity now, was that temporary help would morph into permanent obligation, and that gratitude has a surprisingly short shelf life. I took a job at a local consulting firm for $78,000 a year, nearly $50,000 less than the New York offer. I told myself it was temporary, just until my grandmother recovered and my parents got their financial footing back. I moved into the small apartment above my parents' garage to save money, telling myself it was practical, not a regression. That first month, I contributed $2,000 toward my grandmother's care and medical expenses. The next month, it was $2,500 when additional treatments were needed. By month 4, I was covering the majority of my grandmother's costs plus helping with the household mortgage because my father's store had a particularly slow season. Just until Christmas, he promised. Business always picks up during the holidays. But it didn't pick up, at least not enough to make a difference. My grandmother passed away 18 months after her first stroke, surrounded by family in the living room of the house I was helping to pay for. At her funeral, my mother held my hand and whispered, "Thank you for giving us this time with her. We couldn't have done it without your help." I thought that would be the end of my financial support. I thought I could finally pursue the career I'd postponed, maybe even reapply to positions in larger markets. I started updating my resume, reaching out to former classmates who'd gone on to impressive positions in Seattle, Chicago, Boston. Then my brother Jason lost his job. He'd been working as an assistant manager at a sporting goods store, a position he'd held for 3 years despite numerous complaints about his attitude and work ethic. He came home one Tuesday afternoon, dropped his bag by the door, and announced he'd been fired for personality differences with the regional manager. "It's fine," he said with a shrug that conveyed absolutely no concern. "I'll find something better. This job was beneath me anyway." My father, instead of pushing Jason to immediately begin job hunting or to accept any available position to contribute to the household, simply nodded. "Take some time," he said. "Figure out what you really want to do with your life. No need to rush into something you'll hate." The luxury of time to figure things out. I nearly laughed at the irony. When I had been Jason's age, there had been no discussion of taking time or exploring options. There had been only the immediate expectation that I would step up, contribute, sacrifice. Jason's job search consisted mainly of scrolling through Indeed postings while playing video games, occasionally submitting an application to positions he was wildly underqualified for, then expressing shock when he didn't receive callbacks. Weeks turned into months. My parents, rather than insisting he take any job to contribute to household expenses, made excuses for him. "The job market is really tough right now," my mother would say, despite the fact that I could see help-wanted signs in practically every retail window in our area. "Jason has such potential. We don't want him to settle for something that doesn't utilize his skills." What skills? Exactly, I never dared to ask. Jason had barely graduated from community college with an associate degree in general studies after 5 years of sporadic attendance. But questioning the family narrative about my brother's untapped potential was never acceptable. During this time, I increased my monthly contribution to the household expenses. The mortgage payment was $1,800, which I covered in full. Utilities averaged $400 monthly, also my responsibility. I paid for the family's cell phone plan, $240 for 4 lines. The car insurance for both my parents' vehicles and Jason's car came to $380 monthly. I covered the internet bill, the streaming services my father insisted were necessary, and frequently paid for groceries when my mother would casually mention that she was a bit short that month. I kept meticulous records of everything in an Excel spreadsheet on my laptop, not because I intended to ever demand repayment. That would have been considered petty and cruel in my family's eyes, but because I needed to see the numbers in black and white to confirm that I wasn't imagining the weight of it all. Some months I contributed as much as $4,200. Over 9 years, accounting for variations, I calculated I had paid approximately $347,000 toward my family's expenses. My friend Melissa, a colleague from work who had become my closest confidant during these years, was the only person who saw the situation clearly from the outside. We'd meet for drinks on Friday evenings, and she'd listen as I recounted the latest financial request or family guilt trip. They're using you, she said bluntly one night, about 3 years into my financial support of the family. You know that, right? You're not helping them temporarily. You've become their permanent solution to avoiding adult responsibility. Their family, I'd respond, the defensive justification automatic. What am I supposed to do? Let them lose the house? Let them go without basic necessities? They're adults, Melissa countered. Your father could get a second job. Your mother could work full-time. Jason could take literally any job instead of holding out for some imaginary perfect position. But why would they do any of that when you're bankrolling their entire existence? I would acknowledge she had a point, promise to have a conversation about boundaries and expectations, and then inevitably fall back into the same pattern when my mother would call with tears in her voice about some new financial emergency. The pattern continued. I would pay, they would accept it as their due, and any suggestion that perhaps other family members should contribute more would be met with hurt expressions and accusations of selfishness. My career stagnated because I couldn't afford to take risks or pursue positions in other cities. My dating life was virtually non-existent because I had neither the time nor the money to invest in relationships. My apartment above the garage had gone from a temporary solution to a prison sentence. But moving out would mean leaving them without the financial buffer I'd become. When Jason finally did find employment, nearly 14 months after losing his previous job, it was a part-time position at a gym making $13 an hour. He worked roughly 25 hours per week, contributing perhaps $1,100 monthly to the household before taxes. My parents praised him like he'd just been appointed CEO of a Fortune 500 company. See, my father said proudly. I knew he just needed time to find the right fit. He's going to do great things with this position. Jason kept that job for 7 months before quitting because his manager asked him to work an occasional weekend shift. I need my weekends for my mental health, he explained seriously, as if this were a legitimate medical necessity rather than an excuse to avoid mild inconvenience. My parents supported his decision completely. My father even took him out to dinner to celebrate his stand for work-life balance, a meal I later discovered was charged to the credit card I'd added them to as authorized users for emergencies only. If this pattern sounds familiar, if you've been the responsible one while watching siblings get praised for bare minimum effort, drop a comment below sharing your experience. The story gets substantially worse from here. The breaking point began on a Tuesday evening in mid-November, about 10 days before Thanksgiving. I was reviewing my budget for the upcoming month when I noticed that the credit card I'd given my parents for emergencies had a balance of $4,700. Confused because I hadn't been notified of any emergencies, I logged into the account to review the charges. Dinner at a steakhouse, $340. New television from Best Buy, $1,899. Weekend hotel stay at a spa resort, $875. Designer handbag from Nordstrom, $520. The list continued, charge after charge for items that had nothing to do with emergencies and everything to do with discretionary spending they couldn't afford but apparently felt entitled to make on my dime. I felt heat rising in my face, that peculiar sensation when embarrassment and anger mix into something volatile. I called my mother immediately, trying to keep my voice level and calm. Mom, I'm looking at the credit card statement, I began. There are charges here for thousands of dollars of non-essential items. What happened to this being for emergencies only? There was a brief pause before she responded, her tone defensive. Rebecca, those were emergencies in their own way. The old television broke completely. We couldn't watch anything. And your father has been so stressed with the store. The weekend away was necessary for his mental health. The purse was on sale, and I haven't bought myself anything nice in years. You've bought plenty of nice things, I said, my control slipping. With my money. Money I earn through 60-hour work weeks, while living in a converted garage apartment because I can't afford anything else after supporting this entire household. There's no need to be dramatic, she said, her voice taking on that particular edge that meant I was being unreasonable. We're family. This is what family does. We support each other. Support goes both ways, Mom. When was the last time anyone in this family supported me? The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, she said, quietly, I'll talk to your father about the credit card. But Rebecca, you know we appreciate everything you do. We couldn't survive without you. Couldn't survive or wouldn't survive because they'd made no effort to build their own financial stability while I served as their safety net. I didn't ask the question aloud. I just said goodbye and sat staring at my laptop screen at the spreadsheet that documented 9 years of one-way financial support. That night, I had dinner with Melissa and her husband David at their home. They'd recently purchased a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood I couldn't afford despite making more money than both of them individually. They'd saved, budgeted, made strategic career moves. They'd built a life. You look exhausted, Melissa observed as she poured wine. What happened? I told them about the credit card charges, about my mother's dismissive response, about the crushing realization that I'd spent 9 years funding other people's comfort while putting my own life indefinitely on hold. David, who worked in finance, asked a simple question that I'd been avoiding. What's your exit strategy? Because this can't continue indefinitely. You're 34. When do you get to start living your actual life? I had no answer because I'd never allowed myself to seriously consider the question. The guilt of potentially withdrawing support felt insurmountable. How could I live with myself if my parents lost the house? If Jason ended up homeless because I stopped enabling his refusal to function as a self-sufficient adult? They'll figure it out, Melissa said firmly. Adults figure it out when they have to. The only reason they haven't had to is because you've prevented them from experiencing any consequences. You're not helping them, Rebecca. You're handicapping them. Her words haunted me as I drove home that night. Was she right? Had my support actually harmed them by removing any motivation to become financially independent? The next day, I did something I'd never done before. I told my boss I needed to have a serious conversation about my career trajectory. James Chen had been my manager for 5 years, and we'd always had a good professional relationship. I need to know if there's a path forward for me here, I said directly. Senior consultant positions, team lead opportunities, anything that would represent career advancement and salary growth. James looked uncomfortable. Rebecca, you're a solid performer, very reliable. But to be honest, the senior positions require a different level of commitment. Traveling to client sites, working face-to-face in different cities, sometimes relocating temporarily for major projects. Based on our conversations over the years, I got the impression you weren't available for that kind of flexibility because of family obligations. Family obligations. My career had been categorized and limited by obligations I'd never actually agreed to take on permanently. What if that changed? I asked. What if I became available for travel and relocation? He looked skeptical but interested. Then we'd have a different conversation about your career path. There's actually a senior consultant position opening up next quarter in our Denver office. Salary would be in the $145,000 to $160,000 range, depending on negotiation. But it would require relocating. I thanked him for the information and returned to my desk, mind racing. Denver. A fresh start. Enough money that I could actually save, invest, build something for my own future. It felt like glimpsing a life I'd thought was permanently out of reach. That evening, I made a decision. I would go to Thanksgiving dinner as planned, but I would tell my family that my financial support would be decreasing significantly over the next 6 months as I prepared for a potential job transition. I would give them time to adjust, to make other arrangements, to finally take responsibility for their own financial situation. It felt like a reasonable, even generous approach to establishing boundaries. I was catastrophically wrong about how they would respond. Thanksgiving Day arrived with clear blue skies and unseasonably warm temperatures for late November. I drove to my parents' house, which was about to be filled with extended family. My Aunt Linda and Uncle Mike, their two adult children, and my father's brother Ron and his wife Patricia. The house smelled like roasting turkey and sweet potatoes, achingly nostalgic and familiar. My mother greeted me at the door with a strained smile. "Oh, good, you're here. Can you help me with the final preparations? Your Aunt Linda brought some dishes, but nothing that actually needed effort." I spent the next 90 minutes helping in the kitchen while my brother Jason sat in the living room watching football with my father and uncles. At one point, I asked if he might help set the table or arrange the serving dishes. "I'm spending quality time with Dad and Uncle Ron," he said without looking away from the screen. "You've got this. You're so good at hosting stuff." Good at hosting in a house I was paying the mortgage for, I thought, but didn't say. Dinner itself was pleasant enough initially. The food was excellent, conversation flowed easily. Everyone seemed genuinely happy to be together. My Aunt Linda asked about my job, and I mentioned that I was considering a career opportunity that might involve relocation. "Where to?" she asked with interest. "Potentially Denver. It's not definite yet, but it's a senior consulting position with significantly better compensation and career growth." I noticed my mother and father exchange a look across the table, something passing between them in that silent language of long-married couples. "That's exciting," my cousin Emily said enthusiastically. "Denver is supposed to be amazing. Great quality of life, outdoor activities, growing tech scene." "Denver's very expensive, though," my mother interjected quickly. "The cost of living is quite high. I read an article about it. You might not actually come out ahead financially." "The salary increase would more than compensate," I replied calmly. My father cleared his throat, his signal that he was about to say something he considered important. "Rebecca, that's quite far away from family. Have you really thought through what that would mean? Who would help your mother if she needed something? What about when we're older and need assistance? You're only 62, Dad, and Mom's 59. You're both in good health and perfectly capable of managing your own affairs." "But we've always been close," my mother said, her voice taking on a plaintive quality. "This family has always been there for each other. Moving across the country feels so selfish." The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Selfish. After 9 years of financial sacrifice, after putting my own career and life on hold, after contributing over $340,000 to their comfort and security, I was being called selfish for considering a job opportunity. "I haven't even accepted the position," I said, working to keep my voice even. "I'm just exploring options. And regardless of where I live, I need to have a conversation with all of you about the financial support I've been providing." The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. My brother Jason suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. My father's expression hardened. "What conversation?" my mother asked, though her tone suggested she knew exactly what conversation. "For the past 9 years, I've been contributing between $2,500 and $4,200 monthly toward household expenses. That's in addition to paying rent for the garage apartment. If I pursue this opportunity in Denver, or frankly, even if I don't, that arrangement needs to change significantly." My Uncle Mike, who had been silent through this exchange, looked genuinely shocked. "You've been paying that much? For 9 years?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Jesus, Rebecca," my cousin Emily said softly. "That's more than my mortgage." My father set down his fork with a sharp clink against his plate. "Is this really the time and place for this discussion? We're having a family dinner, celebrating Thanksgiving, being grateful for what we have." "What you have," I corrected quietly, "financed largely by me." "That was your choice," Jason said suddenly, his voice defensive. "Nobody forced you to pay for anything. You offered to help." "I offered to help temporarily after Grandma's stroke 9 years ago. This was never supposed to become a permanent arrangement where I funded everyone's entire lifestyle while sacrificing my own future. My mother's eyes were filling with tears, her go-to response when confronted with uncomfortable truths. "I can't believe you're throwing your help in our faces like this. Family doesn't keep score." "No," I agreed, "family doesn't keep score. But I'm not keeping score, I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference." My father stood abruptly, his face flushed with anger. "Boundaries," he repeated, loading the word with contempt. "Is that what they're teaching in those MBA programs now? How to abandon your family with corporate buzzwords?" "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said, struggling to maintain composure. "I'm saying that, as a family, we need to develop a plan where everyone contributes appropriately, and I'm not carrying the entire financial burden alone." "Your brother is working hard at his job," my mother protested. "He's contributing what he can." Jason worked approximately 20 hours per week at the gym, making roughly $260 weekly before taxes, while living rent-free and having all his expenses covered. My anger finally broke through its carefully maintained containment. "Jason works part-time by choice and contributes almost nothing to this household," I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "Meanwhile, I've paid nearly $350,000 over 9 years while living in a converted garage and watching my career stagnate." The room went absolutely silent. Even the football game playing in the background seemed to quiet. My Aunt Linda was staring at her plate, clearly uncomfortable. Uncle Mike looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. My father's voice, when he spoke, was cold and precise as a scalpel. "We don't need you here anymore, Rebecca. You're making everyone uncomfortable with your attitude and your accusations. Maybe it's better if you just go." Those words, "We don't need you here anymore." After everything, after 9 years of sacrifice, after $347,000, after putting my entire life on hold, I was being dismissed like an unwanted guest who'd overstayed her welcome. I stood carefully, folded my napkin, and placed it beside my plate. My hands were trembling, but my voice remained steady. "You're absolutely right, Dad. You don't need me. You'll figure that out very soon." I gathered my coat and purse, aware that every eye in the room was on me. My mother reached out as I passed her chair. "Rebecca, please, let's not do this. Sit back down. We can talk about this calmly." "We just did talk about it," I replied, and Dad made the family's position very clear. I'm no longer needed or wanted here. I walked out of that house, got into my car, and sat in the driveway for several long minutes, shaking with adrenaline and heartbreak. Then I pulled out my phone and began making changes that would alter all of their lives irrevocably. First, I logged into my bank's online portal. The mortgage payment, scheduled to process the following day, was canceled. Then the automated utility payments, electric, gas, water, trash collection, the car insurance for all 3 vehicles, the internet and cable bundle, the family cell phone plan, the credit card I'd added them to as authorized users. I called the company and had them removed entirely, explaining I was closing the account. Each click, each cancellation, felt simultaneously like setting down a crushing burden and committing an unforgivable betrayal. My hands continued shaking, but I didn't stop. They didn't need me. They'd made that abundantly clear. Time for them to discover what that actually meant in practical terms. The streaming services, the Amazon Prime account they use constantly, the Costco membership, the roadside assistance plan, everything I'd been quietly paying for while being taken for granted or actively dismissed. Gone. By 11:23 p.m., when I finally set my phone down, I'd canceled or removed myself from 17 different services and automatic payments. The total monthly value, $3,847. The annual value, $46,164. I didn't sleep that night. I alternated between feeling justified and nauseated. Around 3 a.m., I called Melissa, waking her up. "I did it," I said when she answered groggily. "I canceled everything." There was a pause. Then I heard her sitting up. Everything. The mortgage, utilities, all of it. All of it. Oh, Rebecca. Her voice was a mixture of concern and pride. How are you feeling? Honestly, I have no idea. Terrified, relieved, guilty, free. All of it simultaneously. They're going to panic, she warned. It's going to get ugly before it gets better. She was right, though even her prediction didn't capture the full scope of the chaos that was about to unfold. The first call came at 6:47 a.m. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 6:51 and 6:58. By 7:30 a.m., there had been 14 calls from her number alone. I finally listened to one of the voicemails. Rebecca, I don't know what you've done, but the mortgage payment didn't go through. The bank just called. Please call me back immediately. Your father is beside himself. Good, I thought with uncharacteristic viciousness. Let him be beside himself for once, instead of calmly confident that his daughter will fix everything. Jason's texts started arriving around 8:15 a.m. WTF, did you do? My phone isn't working. This isn't funny, Rebecca. Turn the phone back on. Mom is literally crying. Are you happy now? You're being a vindictive bitch over one argument. I blocked his number after that last message. I'd tolerated a lot over the years, but I wouldn't tolerate outright verbal abuse. By mid-morning, I had 67 missed calls from various family members. My Aunt Linda left a voicemail trying to mediate. Rebecca, honey, I know you and your parents had a disagreement yesterday, but whatever you've done with the bills and services, you need to undo it. They're panicking. Your mother called me sobbing. Can we please talk about this like adults? The irony of being asked to talk like adults by people who'd enabled my family's financial dysfunction for years wasn't lost on me. My father's first message came at 11:04 a.m. His voicemail was brief and sharp. Rebecca, this is childish and cruel. You're punishing your mother over a simple disagreement. Fix what you've broken. Now. A simple disagreement. Being told I wasn't needed after 9 years of financial sacrifice was being characterized as a simple disagreement. I spent that day, Black Friday, in my apartment with my phone on silent, watching the missed calls pile up. I felt detached from the situation, as if I were observing someone else's family crisis from a distance. Part of me wanted to cave, to undo everything, to restore their comfort and my familiar role. But a stronger part, a part that had been growing slowly over 9 years of accumulated resentment, refused to bend. Around 3 p.m., Melissa came over with takeout food and wine. You're not answering your family, she observed, noting the notifications covering my phone screen. There's nothing to say yet, I replied. They still think this is a tantrum they can wait out. They need to understand this is permanent. Is it permanent? She asked carefully. The relationship as it existed? Absolutely. I'm done being their ATM and scapegoat. That evening, I began receiving messages from extended family members who'd apparently been recruited to the campaign to make me feel guilty. My cousin Emily, I know this isn't my business, but your mom is really upset. Whatever happened at dinner, maybe you could talk it out. Uncle Ron, Rebecca, your father is a proud man. He's not going to apologize, even if he should. But he and your mother need your help. Can you please reconsider whatever you've done? Even my Aunt Patricia, who I'd barely spoken to in years, sent a message. Family is forever, Rebecca. Don't let money come between you and the people who love you. Money hadn't come between us. Money had been the only thing connecting us, apparently. On Saturday morning, I woke to discover my mother had come to my apartment while I was sleeping and left a letter slipped under my door. Her handwriting was shaky, emotional. Rebecca, I don't understand what's happening or why you're doing this. Your father said things he shouldn't have on Thursday. He was stressed and overwhelmed, and he took it out on you unfairly. But this punishment you're inflicting on the entire family is far worse than anything he said. The mortgage payment didn't process. We have late fees. The utility companies are threatening disconnection. Your brother can't contact potential employers because his phone doesn't work. Please, I'm begging you, stop this. We can talk about whatever changes need to happen, but not like this. Not by cutting us off from basic necessities. I love you. Dad loves you, even if he can't say it right. We need you. Please call me Mom. I read the letter 3 times. We need you. Not we love you, or we value you, or we've taken you for granted. We need you, because I was useful, because I provided resources they'd become dependent on. I sat down and wrote my own letter in response, printing it carefully so there would be no emotional shakiness in my words. Mom and Dad, for 9 years, I have contributed approximately $3,800 monthly to household expenses. Over that period, this totals roughly $347,000, money that could have been invested, used for my own housing, or built toward my future. I did this initially out of love and a genuine desire to help during Grandma's illness. I continued doing it because every time I considered stopping, there was a new crisis or emergency that made withdrawal seem cruel. This arrangement has prevented me from advancing in my career, from moving to cities with better opportunities, from saving adequately for my own future, and from having any sort of personal life. I've lived in a converted garage apartment for 9 years, making more money than anyone else in this family, while watching my career stagnate because I couldn't take risks or relocate. When I attempted to discuss changing this arrangement on Thursday, I was met with defensiveness, accusations of selfishness, and ultimately told that I was not needed here anymore. Dad made that statement very clearly in front of the entire extended family. I am taking him at his word. If I am not needed, then my financial support is not needed either. This is not a punishment, it is a boundary. I will no longer pay the mortgage, utilities, insurance, phone bills, or any other household expenses. I gave 9 years. That is enough. I would recommend Dad consider full-time employment or a second job. Mom could move to full-time hours at the dental office. Jason needs to find full-time employment immediately and begin contributing substantially to household expenses if he wishes to continue living there rent-free. There are government assistance programs, payment plans with utility companies, and refinancing options for the mortgage. These are all resources available to adults who take responsibility for their own financial situations. I wish you the best in figuring this out, but I will not be your solution anymore. Rebecca. I printed the letter, placed it in an envelope, and slipped it under their front door late Saturday night when I knew they'd be asleep. Then I drove to a hotel on the other side of town, checked in under my own name, and slept more soundly than I had in months. Sunday brought a new wave of contact attempts. My mother discovered the letter and called 17 times in 2 hours. Jason somehow got a working phone and sent a barrage of texts that ranged from pleading to threatening. My father left one voicemail, his voice tight with controlled fury. You will regret this betrayal, Rebecca. Family doesn't forget this kind of abandonment. Don't bother coming around when you realize what you've thrown away. The assumption that I would come crawling back, that I would eventually fold under the pressure and restore their comfortable status quo, was almost impressive in its certainty. Monday morning, I called James Chen and told him I was extremely interested in the Denver position. I'd like to interview as soon as possible. Tuesday, I met with a real estate agent about selling or renting out the garage apartment I'd been living in. Technically, my parents owned the property, but we'd had a verbal agreement that I could stay there as long as I was paying the mortgage. That arrangement was obviously void now. Wednesday, my mother showed up at my office building. Security called to ask if I wanted to see her. I agreed, meeting her in the lobby rather than letting her come up to my floor. She looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Her hair hadn't been styled. She was wearing sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, a far cry from her usual carefully curated appearance. "Rebecca, please," she began before I could say anything. "Please just talk to me about this. We're your family. "We're sorry about what happened at Thanksgiving. Your father has been impossible, I know. But this isn't the way to handle it. You're destroying everything over one argument." "It's not about one argument, Mom. It's about 9 years of taking me for granted. It's about being told I wasn't needed after sacrificing my entire adult life to support this family financially." "We never asked you to sacrifice anything," she insisted, her voice rising. "You chose to help us. Nobody forced you." "You're right," I agreed calmly. "I chose to help, and now I'm choosing to stop. That's how choices work. They can change." "The bank is threatening foreclosure," she said, tears starting again. "We missed the mortgage payment, and they're saying if we miss another one, they'll start proceedings. We could lose the house, Rebecca. The house you grew up in, where your grandmother died, where 3 generations of this family have lived." "Then I suggest you figure out how to make the mortgage payment," I replied. "Dad could get a second job. You could work full-time. Jason could get full-time employment instead of 20 hours a week at a gym. There are solutions, just not easy ones." "We can't make that much that quickly," she said desperately. "We need time to adjust, to make changes. Can you please just cover the mortgage for 3 more months while we figure things out? Please, Rebecca, I'm begging you. 3 months would become 6 months, would become a year, would become forever." I'd heard this song before. "No," I said simply. "I gave you 9 years, Mom. That's 108 months. You've had plenty of time to figure things out. But you never had to, because I was always there to solve the problem. I'm not doing it anymore." She stared at me like I was a stranger, someone she didn't recognize. "What happened to you? You used to be so kind, so giving." "I got tired of being used," I replied. "Kindness without reciprocity becomes exploitation. I'm done being exploited." I turned and walked back to the elevators, leaving her standing in the lobby. My hands were shaking, but I didn't look back. The rest of that week brought increasingly frantic and then increasingly hostile communications from various family members. Uncle Mike called to tell me I was being unreasonable and cruel. Aunt Linda sent a long text about how I was breaking my mother's heart and destroying the family. My cousin Emily, whom I'd actually liked, sent a disappointed message about how family was supposed to forgive and support each other unconditionally. Unconditionally, that word kept appearing. I was supposed to support them unconditionally, financially, emotionally, practically, while receiving no support in return, not even basic respect or appreciation. Jason's messages became particularly venomous. He called me a selfish bitch, a traitor, and told me I'd rot in hell for abandoning family. The irony of him calling me selfish, while he'd contributed virtually nothing to the household for years, was apparently lost on him entirely. My father never called again after that one voicemail. His silence was somehow more unsettling than my mother's constant contact attempts. I learned from my Aunt Linda that he'd taken out a personal loan to cover the immediate bills, using his truck as collateral. The loan was at 19% interest, she told me, her tone suggesting this was somehow my fault. He could have asked me to help negotiate a better solution, to work out a transition plan, to discuss options, but his pride wouldn't allow it. Instead, he'd rather pay predatory interest rates than admit he might need to have a real conversation with his daughter. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I interviewed for the Denver position via video call. It went exceptionally well. The hiring manager was impressed by my experience and specifically liked that I'd stayed with my current company for 9 years, showing loyalty and commitment. If only he knew that loyalty had come at the cost of my financial and personal freedom. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, I received a formal job offer. Senior consultant position in Denver, starting salary of $158,000 plus benefits. Relocation package included. Start date of January 15th. I accepted immediately. For weeks after Thanksgiving, I gave notice at my current job. James Chin seemed genuinely happy for me, though slightly regretful to lose me. "You've been underutilized here for years," he admitted. This is the right move for your career. My mother found out about the Denver job through my Aunt Linda, who'd heard it from my cousin Emily, who'd apparently seen something on LinkedIn. She left a voicemail that was equal parts grief and anger. So you're really doing this. You're really abandoning your family and moving across the country. I hope you're happy, Rebecca. I hope your career is worth destroying the people who raised you and loved you. I didn't respond to that message or any of the others that followed. As Christmas approached, I received an invitation to Christmas dinner at my parents' house. The message was from my mother, trying to sound cheerful and normal. We'd love to see you for Christmas. It wouldn't be the same without you. Please come. We can put everything behind us and start fresh. Everything behind us. Translation: I should come back, resume paying for everything, pretend Thanksgiving never happened, and return to my role as the family ATM. I declined the invitation. I spent Christmas Day with Melissa and David at their house. Their actual family welcomed me warmly, Melissa's parents, her sister, David's brother. It was the first holiday I could remember where I wasn't managing logistics, covering costs, or feeling vaguely resentful the entire time. I brought a nice bottle of wine and some gourmet cookies. Nobody expected me to fund the entire celebration. You look different, Melissa observed as we sat by their fireplace after dinner. Lighter somehow. I feel lighter, I admitted, like I've been carrying 100-pound weight and finally set it down. Any regrets? She asked carefully. I considered the question honestly. About establishing boundaries and refusing to be used anymore? No. About how my family has responded and the relationship damage? Yes. But I can't control their response, only my own choices. The week before my move to Denver, I received one final message from my father. It was a text, brief and cold. When you're struggling and alone in a new city with no family support, remember that you chose this. You chose your career over the people who loved you. Live with that choice. The message was meant to hurt, to make me doubt my decision, to plant seeds of regret. Instead, it crystallized something I'd been slowly realizing. The people who truly loved me wouldn't weaponize that love or hold it hostage to financial support. I moved to Denver on January 12th. The relocation company packed up my belongings from the garage apartment while I was at work. I couldn't face seeing my parents' house one more time. Melissa and David helped me load my personal items into my car the night before I left. You're doing the right thing, Melissa said as she hugged me goodbye. It doesn't feel like it yet, but you are. I drove away from that city, from that life, from that family dynamic, early on a Friday morning. I didn't cry. I felt numb, exhausted, uncertain, but also something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope. Denver welcomed me with snow-covered mountains visible from my new apartment's balcony and a job that challenged me in ways I'd forgotten I loved. My new colleagues treated me as a peer, not as someone's perpetual support system. I made friends who knew me only as Rebecca, the consultant, not Rebecca, the family ATM. 6 months into my Denver life, I received an email from Jason. It was the first communication from any family member since my father's bitter text. Rebecca, I need to talk to you. Not about money or anything like that. I need to tell you something. Can we talk on the phone? Curious, despite my better judgment, I called him. He answered on the second ring. Thanks for calling, he said, his voice different than I remembered. Less defensive, more uncertain. What did you want to talk about? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. I got a full-time job, he began, at a distribution center. It's not glamorous or anything, but it's 40 hours a week with benefits. I'm making $21 an hour, and I started contributing to the household expenses. Like actually contributing. That's good, Jason. I'm glad you found something stable. I had to, he said quietly. After you left, after the bills started piling up and Dad took out that loan, I realized I couldn't just coast anymore. None of us could. We had to actually figure out how to be financially functional without you. I waited, unsure where this was going. I'm calling to say you were right, he continued. About all of it. We used you. I used you. I spent years barely working, barely contributing, assuming you'd always be there to cover the difference. And when you tried to set boundaries, we attacked you for it instead of recognizing how badly we'd failed you. I appreciate you saying that. I managed, genuinely surprised. Mom and Dad won't apologize, he added. They still talk about you like you betrayed the family. But I see it differently now. You didn't betray us. We betrayed you for years, and you finally stopped allowing it. We talked for another 20 minutes. He told me about the changes at home. Dad had taken a second job on weekends doing handyman work. Mom had gone full-time at the dental office. They'd downsized to one car. They'd cut every possible expense and were slowly digging out of the hole that had been partially my creation by enabling them and partially their own refusal to face financial reality. Are they going to lose the house? I asked, hating that I still cared about the answer. No, Jason said. We worked out a modified payment plan with the bank. It's tight, but manageable if we all contribute, which we are now, all of us. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. Something that had been knotted tight in my chest for months loosened slightly. Not forgiveness yet, that would take much more time and possibly never fully arrive, but something adjacent to it. Acknowledgement. Validation. They'd figured it out, just like Melissa had said they would. Because they had to. Because I'd stopped preventing them from experiencing consequences. A year after moving to Denver, I was promoted to principal consultant with a salary of $189,000. I'd purchased a small house with a yard. I'd started dating someone, a civil engineer named Marcus, who had his life together and never expected me to subsidize his existence. I had savings, actual savings, for the first time in my adult life. I maintained very limited contact with Jason, occasional texts and brief calls. He'd met someone, was talking about moving out and getting his own apartment. The job at the distribution center had led to a supervisory position. He was building something, finally. My mother sent a birthday card on my 36th birthday. Inside, she'd written, "Thinking of you. Love, Mom." No demands, no guilt trips, no requests for reconciliation or money. Just acknowledgement of the day. I sent a thank you text. My father and I had no contact. According to Jason, he still viewed my departure as a betrayal and wasn't interested in repair. Some relationships, I'd learned, don't survive honesty. That was painful, but also clarifying. Looking back now at those 9 years of financial support and the chaos that followed my withdrawal, I see it all differently. I thought I was being selfless and loving by supporting my family financially. What I was actually doing was enabling their dysfunction and handicapping my own life. Real love, I've learned, includes boundaries. Real family reciprocates support rather than simply extracting it. And real self-worth isn't measured by how much you're willing to sacrifice for people who won't sacrifice for you. The most unexpected gift came from the breakdown itself. When everything fell apart, when I stopped being the family's financial solution and became their scapegoat instead, I discovered who I actually was outside of that role. I wasn't just the responsible daughter, the reliable ATM, the perpetual safety net. I was someone with my own dreams, career ambitions, and the right to build a life that wasn't defined by other people's needs and failures. Some people will say I should have handled it differently, that I was too harsh, that family deserves endless chances. Those people have never lived my experience. They don't know what it's like to work 60-hour weeks while living in a converted garage, watching your career stagnate and your savings disappear into other people's poor choices, being told you're selfish when you finally say enough. I don't regret leaving. I don't regret canceling those bills. I don't regret choosing my own future over their comfortable dependence on me. What I regret is that it took me 9 years and $347,000 to realize I had a choice at all. On Thanksgiving 2 years after that catastrophic dinner, Marcus and I hosted our own celebration. We invited friends, colleagues, people we'd chosen to build community with. Melissa and David flew out from my old city. along with two of my new Denver friends. We cooked together, laughed together, and when we went around the table sharing gratitudes, I said honestly, I'm grateful I learned the difference between being used and being loved. Later that evening, I received a text from Jason. Just a photo of him and a young woman I didn't recognize at a restaurant table. The caption read, Happy Thanksgiving. Hope you're doing well. I sent back a simple you too and a smiley emoji. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but acknowledgement. A sliver of connection that didn't demand anything from either of us. As I cleaned up from dinner that night, Marcus asked if I ever thought about reaching out to my parents, trying to repair things more substantially. Sometimes, I admitted, but then I remember that they still haven't apologized. They still fundamentally don't understand what they did wrong. And I can't rebuild a relationship with people who think I'm the villain for refusing to be exploited. He nodded, understanding. That makes sense. Just checking that you're at peace with it. I am, I said, realizing it was true. I'm at peace. To anyone reading this who recognizes themselves in my story, who's been the one carrying everyone else, sacrificing their own dreams to fund other people's comfort, being called selfish for finally setting boundaries, know this. You're not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, especially not when they won't even acknowledge the heat you're providing. I spent 9 years being the family solution, their safety net, their walking ATM. I was praised when useful and discarded when I suggested changes. That's not love. That's exploitation with a family label attached. The real tragedy wasn't me leaving or cutting off financial support. The real tragedy was that it took so long for me to realize I deserved better than being valued only for what I could provide. My father said I'd chosen my career over family. He was wrong. I chose self-respect over exploitation. I chose a future over resentment. I chose to stop participating in a dynamic where my worth was measured entirely in dollars contributed and gratitude never required. 3 years later, I'm thriving in Denver with a career I love, genuine friends, a partner who sees me as an equal, and savings that are actually mine. My family figured out how to function without my subsidization. Some relationships survived the transition, others didn't. And I sleep soundly at night, free from the crushing weight of expectations I never agreed to carry permanently. Have you ever been the family member everyone depended on but no one appreciated? Have you had to choose between enabling dysfunction and establishing boundaries? Share your story in the comments below. You're not alone in this experience. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about setting boundaries, recognizing your worth, and building the life you actually want rather than the one others expect you to fund. Thank you for reading, and remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival.